You're tuned into the Writing Community Chat Show, the live streaming YouTube podcast that brings you the stories of authors, screenwriters, and more. Indie or established, this show's for the community, and we invite you to be a part of it. Head to the writingcommunitychatshow.com for more info. The WCCS. Together as one, we get it done.
Hello and welcome to the Writing Community Chat Show. Hello and happy Friday. We have made it to the weekend. Welcome to the Writing Community Chat Show. My name is Chris. I'm here with my co-host Chris, so it makes it easier if I go by CJ. How's your week been? How are you doing? Hello, Chris. How are you doing?
Yeah, I'm really good, Agate. It's been a productive week. We've come up with some really good ideas that I'm excited about. So, yeah, what's not to be excited about?
Absolutely. We've got another fantastic guest for you tonight. So someone who's worked in screen and is now working on their novel. So this is fantastic. So working on, has completed their novel. But yes, we've got a good guest coming up. So stick around, ask your questions. And yeah, we've had some big news this week, Chris. We've actually, after 5 years of grafting on this show, turned it into a business. We are now the Writing Community Chat Show CIC, which is a community interest company. Which means it's like a non-profit social enterprise where we try and create courses and online content for a lot of writers and authors and use that to grow the business and then also try and give back to the community even more. And the more cool, quirky ideas we can come up with and the more expansive we can make the business, the better. But it's all going back around the community, and hopefully we can just start making some brilliant things for the community beyond the show. So that's great news this week, Chris.
Yeah, and that's been the motivation for my reading. So I've got What They Don't Teach You at Harvard Business School. That's been one of them. I've got The Art of Winning, which, again, it's not about winning or losing, but we've got to know how to do it properly. And then Black Box Thinking as well. So I've got my sort of business hat on. I've got my inspiration in terms of books. And yeah, I'm excited to bring people new opportunities and, you know, really get it to where it needs to be, the Writing Community Chat Show, and all the things we've talked about behind the scenes that we've not even discussed yet. Again, it's really exciting. It's taking that control and that power back into our own hands, doing what we're passionate about, making sure that we're getting out there and supporting people in the way that we have been doing with these shows and these interviews. And yeah, it's exciting.
Certainly is. So with those books you read this week, Chris, or the ones that you just shown us, is there one takeaway from any of those you can share with us today that people might find interesting?
Yeah, so a lot of these books always talk about your purpose. Okay. And obviously we're quite clear on what our purpose is in terms of helping others. Sharing your success is one element of it. And again, that's something that we've been doing, sharing the success of authors, obviously like tonight's guest as well, sharing how they've done it, how they've got there, how they can inspire others. So yeah, just loads of really good tips and advice. Creating impressions, obviously that's something that we've been doing. So I'll just read through some of these chapters, not the whole chapters, obviously, but one of them is on creating impressions. The other one is taking the edge. So again, if you're stepping out there, what you should do. Getting ahead is one of them. Timing, and again, is the timing right now to help people and inspire people? Yeah, I think it is. And I think with all the things we've done on this show in terms of the online platform and the interviews, you know, if we can take that to people and make it more personal and be sort of in a space where people can come, they can chat to us, the community can grow together in an organic way, then I think, yeah, it's going to be really fun and exciting for everyone to be involved in.
Certainly is. And I think the one thing that we're both fully aware of as self-published authors ourselves, of how isolating it is on that journey and how much the community has helped us. That's why the show exists, but also bringing people along and trying to get that community to grow in that sense that they've not only got the extra support they need, but also the other people around them on the same journey, like-minded people that can bounce off each other and assist people in growing as well. because we're all in this together. Everything's changing all the time with publishing, and AI is coming into the game now as well. So how we deal with that. So there's a lot of things that we're going to be working on. We'll be releasing a lot of those behind the scenes thoughts that me and Chris have gone through on our Substack soon. And it looks like the future is snowballing, I'd say, in terms of things that are going on. And soon we'll have a little sponsorship announcement, just finalizing that as well from quite a well-known book-related company. So yeah, things are happening, and we're looking forward to the future of this now business. So yeah, exciting.
Yeah, and one of the things that a lot of books always say is you become the 5 people that you spend the most time with. And for me, like, I can't see these people physically in person, but I can read about them, get to know what they're all about, and then hope to absorb some of that knowledge. And it's the same with the shows. If you've got a writer that you really admire, the chances are we've probably already interviewed them. So again, go back through the shows, have a little look, pick maybe the 5 authors that you're most inspired by, and listen to what they've said. Like, because one of the things about this show and what makes it great is we get to the nitty-gritty elements of it, and we go, well, how do you do that? What have you done to do that? What advice could you give to somebody else? And if you're absorbing that in and taking it on yourself, the chances are you're going to have some element of success with your own writing as well. And that's obviously what we've been trying to do for the past 5 years.
Yeah, absolutely. And with that, impression of story, with that in mind, let me introduce tonight's guest, and we're going to get stuck in his story, and it's a fascinating one. So let's get into that now. So tonight's guest is a storyteller through and through, whether it's through the lens of a camera or the pages of a gritty noir novel. He first made waves in the film industry with Two Step, a dark and gripping thriller that premiered at SXSW, and went on to earn critical acclaim, including being named New York Times Critics' Pick and holding a perfect score on Rotten Tomatoes. Rotten, not rotting. Since then, he wrote screenplays from major studios like Paramount and Sony, including an adaptation of Ernest, Tidyman's Big Bucks, and his Blacklist selected script, Northeast Kingdom. But now he's turned his razor-sharp eye to fiction. His debut novel, Brooklyn Motto, showcased above Chris, as always, is a love letter to the late 90s New York. Equal parts mystery, social commentary, and character study. It's been described as witty, brooding, stylish, and deeply human. So everybody, please welcome to the show filmmaker, screenwriter, and now novelist, Alex R. Johnson. Hello, Alex.
Hello, CJ and Chris. Thanks for having me.
Oh, you're very, very welcome. Thank you so much for joining us. How are you doing? How's your week been?
It's been good. I've been under the gun with a deadline for the day job for the film stuff. So I've been a little stressed. But
Yeah.
I'm trying to submit something end of day LA time today. So we'll see if I can meet that deadline that I've self-imposed.
So we've interrupted your deadline.
It's good. It's that, any writing, if you're locked in it and you don't you don't walk away from it, you don't see it with clear eyes. So I'm indebted to you for giving me the clear eyes for seeing all the crap that I wrote when I go back to it in an hour.
Yeah, absolutely. So how many deadlines, most people might find difficulties with motivation to get things done in their own time, but does a deadline help you get to that sort of end line, or does it kind of put pressure on you in a different kind of way?
I think it helps. The problem is that I generally have my epiphanies about 2 weeks before the deadline. You know what I mean? So I'm sort of fiddling about for a while, and then I realize it, and I'm like, oh crap. I need to squeeze a few more weeks out of what's left in time, but yeah, I mean, I think they're necessary. I mean, William Goldman, the famous screenwriter, used to always say, when people asked him, how do you know when a script's ready? And he would say, if you're writing it, nobody paid you to write it, it's ready when it's ready. If somebody paid you to write it, it's ready when it's due.
Yeah.
So,
interesting.
So it's, you try to put everything into it, but yeah, it's a little stressful.
So what we like to do on the show is definitely rewind the tape a little bit, find a bit more about you and kind of how that whole journey started. So first of all, where in the world are you right now?
I'm in Brooklyn, New York. My family is from New York originally, but we moved about a lot. My father was an FBI agent, and so it's sort of like being an army brat. You move every two to 3 years about. So, but we always kept coming back. We kind of hovered between New York and DC. That was kind of the main areas that I grew up in. And then I thought I wanted to like teach film theory. I loved arguing about genre and all that stuff. I loved having, imagining myself in tweed and a pipe, just riffing, Bresson. But I made the mistake of working on a film set, and I just fell in love with being on a film set, and that sort of started a path in film. Mostly starting with documentary, and that's only because my first gig, the first person to really hire me was Maysles Films, which is a famous documentary company out of New York. They did Gimme Shelter, Salesman. They're kind of the grandfathers of the verite movement. And so I kind of came up at that company and then went off, and before I knew it, I was producing. But I was always writing. Always writing. I always looked at that as sort of the film work as the day job, and what I really wanted to do was write. Submitted to festivals, because in the film industry, nobody wants to be the first person to say you're good. That's a little too risky. So if you get your screenplay into a festival or a lab or something like that, you can use that to get a little bit of attention. So somebody starts listening to you. They said I was good. You should pay attention to me. So that started to happen. And, but I still couldn't really break through. At that point, my family and we moved to Austin, Texas for about 10 years. And when I was in Austin, I kind of stopped producing. I was like, I have to just stop producing. I need to do my own work. And I think within 2 years, maybe 3 years after we got there, we were shooting Two Step. Austin had that. It's a much different town now, but 10 years ago, it still had a lot of its old school Keep Austin Weird vibes, and it also had the whole kind of DIY, like, you want to make a movie, let's make a movie vibes, and that helped tremendously. And that launched my professional career. The film did everything. I always say it did everything it was supposed to do. It critically great, wonderfully received. Everybody got good raves, and it also pretty much bankrupted us. So, but it did start my professional career, representation, and then I started working in Hollywood in the studio world. And that was really like air brakes, just the kind of difference between being independent and then suddenly being at the studio world. And my first big script I had sold to Paramount, and Michael Bay's company was supposed to produce it. And I remember calling the producer and just being like, so what can I do? What can I do today to help get this made? And on the indie level, you're always thinking, what's happening today where I can inch us a little closer to production? What can I do? And the producer just was shocked and just said, like, you don't do anything. You stop calling me and I'll try to, get this going, but you can't do anything. And that was a wake-up call to me. And then gradually I realized that you can have a career in the studio system as a writer and not have any movies get made. There used to be about 6 studios. Now there's like 2.5. I don't know. They're all under the same parent company practically, but they used to make about 10 movies a year each. Now they make about 3 to 6 movies a year each. And wow. So they'll buy hundreds of screenplays each year. And it's really, and a company like Warner Brothers might have like, well, then we're going to have one Batman. Of their 6, they might be able to go, one's going to be a Batman, one's going to be a Chris Nolan film, one's going to be a Clint Eastwood film. And then they have like 2 slots left or 3 slots left. So it's very it's very hard to get things made. But what would happen is you're writing these scripts, you're creating these worlds, you're developing these characters that you fall in love with, and then you sell it, and you get money, and you're earning a living, but it never gets made, and you lose the world.
Yeah.
No, it's not yours anymore. At least in the United States. In the United States, we in the union, we give up our copyright in exchange for benefits that the union gives us. That was a deal we made in the 60s. That's how we got healthcare and things like that. So we don't own copyright. The studio or the producers own it. So it just became, I don't want to like cry too much. I'm not digging ditches. I am writing screenplays. I'm meeting with people, and it is creative, and it is satisfying on a certain level. But we do this to actually have people read our work or enjoy our stories, right? To tell stories to people. And that's when I was like, well, I think I'm gonna write a book. I think the next thing I'm gonna do is a book. And I started it during COVID, and we were still in Austin, and I just was missing New York so desperately. We didn't have any family in Texas, and I was kind of ready to leave anyways, ready to head. We were either going to move to LA or we were going to go back to New York. And I just was missing New York so much. And I just kind of went back to it in the book. And so I was just in there every day, in my head, and also going back to a time when I was, young and immortal at 1998, It was a real enjoyable experience, but totally daunting. Screenwriting is fast. I mean, lightning fast compared to people go at their different paces, but writing a book is a slog, and it took some getting used to that.
Yeah, I was going to ask. Obviously, writing screenplays is a lot more direct and to the point. Whereas when you're writing a novel, especially when people talk about your book being atmospheric in relation to Brooklyn. So, did you really take sort of a steep learning curve when it came to description or that sort of thing, or was it quite a nice transition for you, or was it something you had to work on?
I think that I always talk about this because people, I think, have a misconception about what screenplays are like. They used to be fairly sterile, right? They used to be bullet points. And I always cite the example of look at the first Alien screenplay.
Yeah.
And it's like every description is just a slug line that doesn't go all the way over to the side. And it's information. Then read James Cameron's Aliens screenplay. It's one of the most gripping, beautiful, atmospheric. You can smell it. You can taste it. You can see it. It's so gripping. And that's really where screenwriting has kind of been in the past, 20 years. People have been, you want people to be excited and to about the work and to want to see it come to life. You definitely need to be more economical with words, right? You have to. It is a business where people will flip to the last page to see how many pages it is, and I have written scripts for executives where I'm fairly certain every rewrite was described to them, where they didn't read it. So you do need to understand that, there needs to be a lot of white on the page. You need to make it look unintimidating. But the real change for me so I always was fairly descriptive. I've been described as a literary screenwriter, both as a compliment and an insult. But the really thing was the first person. That was totally brand new to me and absolutely intoxicating. I just loved writing in the first person. It was a joy. So that was at first, it took some getting used to, and then also understanding it's like, oh, well, if I'm first person, then we can only see what this person sees.
Yeah.
And it suddenly you realize, oh, it has limitations. But that was really the biggest change for me, that was also just a complete joy, to do.
So Alex, how have you managed to navigate that? Because obviously you talked about being a producer and then going into writing. I'm guessing almost to put your career back in your own hands. And we talked about this at the start of the show about putting things back into your sort of control. So you are in a certain element of control with the writing side of it. But then how have you managed to sort of navigate the frustration of being in control, taking back ownership of your own sort of life in that respect, but then having to pass it over in exchange for being able to continue to do it, but then having that frustration when it doesn't get made or get produced and somebody's just sitting on your work and your world that you spent so much time and effort into, and then moving on to the next one. So could you just enlighten us to sort of how you personally navigated that experience?
Probably poorly at first. Since then I understand that it is the business, it is the reality of working in the business. And I love that you have this community, because when my screenwriting career began, we were living in Austin, and I'm because my sale was kind of a big sale at the beginning, and I got put right in the union. Like, I had enough credits to go right in the union. So I was in the WGA. And so, but there really weren't any other people in the Writers Guild in Austin. There were a few, but not many. And so I never really felt part of a community. And then when I came back to New York about 3 years ago, we moved back. And I called up my union rep in the West Coast, because we're on the verge of a strike, and I wanted to be able to do things in New York, even though I was a West Coast Guild member. And he was like, well, just join the East Coast Guild, just do it. So I joined the East Coast Guild. I transferred to the East Coast Guild, and suddenly I was, in a community of writers, which I had never really experienced. And the strike happened shortly thereafter. And so I'm walking the picket lines, and, we're all chatting for the first time in a long time. And you just realize how consistent the story is of the frustrations, and, and you're still frustrated, but you're part of a community of frustration. So it makes it it hurts a little less maybe. So that certainly helped me. And that was also at the time, I was with a pretty big book agent in New York. And I'm not going to name the person. And it was a very frustrating experience. I had heard just how big this person was and what he could do. And then I could never get him on the phone, which has never been my experience with my film agents. They've always been, they'll call me back if they can't take my call, or they'll text me or something. But this guy, I couldn't even connect with. And it got very frustrating. And, we were sending it out, and I didn't understand the process of how he was sending it out. He would send it to like three companies, and then he said he would give them 4 months, and then he would send it to some more. And it was just like, I'm going to be dead, by the time this thing ever gets published. And I was walking with a lot of other writers, and then started talking to a few that self-published. And I was like, I hate, and it was just that feeling again of being out of control. Like, just let this person do their job. And I was like, I don't know if they like their job, or if they know their job, or, they're successful, but I don't know if it's because of how well they do their job. I think they're just, it's just the world. So I took the book back after about 1.5 years and started just doing, a lot of research. I did send it out to a bunch of super indie, small presses, which I had asked my agent to do at the time, and he said he wouldn't, because he doesn't make any money that way. So that was right about when we kind of parted ways. So I sent it to a bunch of presses that were okay with having no representation, but or no, you know, I didn't have someone else sending it for me, you know. And I was offered a couple of publishing deals that, just my experience in the independent film world, it sounded a whole lot of, you know, where people would offer me distribution deals and they'd say like, oh, and then, you know, and then Mike here's our marketing team. And I was like, I thought Mike answered the phones. And they're like, well, Mike answers the phones and he does marketing. And I was like, do you mean like Facebook or do you mean marketing? And he's like, well, Facebook and Twitter. And, you know, it's like, so, but what about like marketing, you know? And then they're like, well, if you want some art and if you want that, you know, you're welcome to go out and hire someone to do it. And it just became clear that it was going to be that similar situation. And I would still end up probably paying somebody to do some publicity. And I just thought, well, why not just do this where I'm in control of every process, or at least I'm you know, I'm supervising people that I trust, between the copy editor or the incredible artists that did our cover and the graphic on the inside, you know, and just and everyone I spoke to on the guild on the lines that self-published was like, just don't rush it. You know, your instinct, once you've waited for 2 years because of your agent or whatever, and now you're like, well, I'm going to self-publish, and people rush it, and they shouldn't rush. You know, you've got to treat it maybe not a year out, but give it 6 months, you know, something so you can plan and try to do some publicity and all that stuff. So that's what I decided to do. And, you know, I'm glad it's certainly uphill. It's certainly an uphill climb. But I'm glad I did it that way. And the book exists as it exists. And, you know, and I was a part of every piece of it. So, you know, I'm proud of it.
Yeah.
So what advice would you give to people then, Alex, in terms of, like, you talked about getting that good attention, and when you went off and obviously produced your own film and it got so much critical praise, and, you know, everyone was praising it in the right way, viewers loved it and critics loved it as well. How much of a temptation is there then for you to be creating that good attention for yourself, and how do you actually do that?
You know, I think unfortunately you realize how you should have done it long after you should have done it, you know, generally. You know, my main advice with anyone, I do a lot of mentoring at the Guild with, you know, I'm not going to say younger screenwriters, new screenwriters, because a lot of people join the Guild, you know, in their 40s and 50s and 60s, is always have, at least in the film aspect, you always have to have more than one project. You know, it is so hard to get anything made. It's so hard to sell anything, and it's so hard to get anything made. You need to have multiple things that you're trying to do at the same time. And then when something goes, you go with it. You know, you ride the current with it, because there's so much working against it and working against being a success in film, that you already have, you know, the kind of like level of difficulty is already so high if you have any momentum to go with it. You know, with the book, I probably, my lesson to myself is probably, even though I gave myself 6 months out when I decided to start this process, I probably should have done a year, you know, to do it to really do it properly. It's so hard though. It's so hard. You're so desperate for it to be out. And, you know, and you think 6 months, and I'm like, I don't know if I can survive 6 months, like with it not out yet. I've waited years, you know, but it's certainly worth it to take your time with it and just, you know, take a deep breath and understand that, you know, it's good for the book. But then I will say I have a lot of friends. When I started in New York, I was doing some music stuff as well. And I have a lot of friends that are still in the music business. And I feel like the only ones that are still in the music business are doing publicity that are my age. and I was speaking to one recently, and he does PR for Billy Bragg here in the States, and he said he tells all his independent artists nowadays, you can't think of it as a release day or week or month. It's a release year. You know, just it's a hustle, and it's so hard to get attention, and you just got to try and just keep sending out those query letters, you know, trying to get on the podcasts, trying to be interviewed, trying to get the book out there. Like, give it a year. Like, don't crack if when it comes out, it doesn't, you know, sell 1,000 to 10,000 copies on the first day or something like that. You know, like, just know that it takes time, especially when you're working from an independent level. You just have so much against you, you know?
Yeah, there's been a few occasions where we've had people on the show that have been really sort of informative, and the way they approach their book sales is like stripping it right down and building it as a business, and really taking that professional business approach and working on it like it's your day job.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of indie authors perhaps don't do that. I'm one myself, you know, I'm obviously busy doing other things, but there's a lot of people that don't actually think of it in that sense and do exactly what you said, is rush it out there and then expect things to happen. But it's that whole after the writing process where the real hard work begins, unfortunately, for a lot of people. And that marketing is a crucial aspect. So I think a lot of people really need to take that into account and do what you said, really look at it more ahead of time and more after the release as well.
Yeah. And also, I mean, people have, you know, a lot more ability to get some exposure than they think. I mean, you know, the whole blurb process is, you know, so absolutely devastatingly humiliating. But at the same time, you could cold email people, and if you were fans of theirs, and you can, you know, this is 2025, you can figure out people's email addresses. It might cost you $9 a month, but you can, you know, from various websites. And, you know, you can cold email, or you can send emails, or just, and you can put, you know, you put some personal connection to their work and how they've mattered, and that it would mean so much if they could, you know, read your work. I had a few people that responded that way to my blurbs, but then also you generally don't realize how connected you are. Maybe it's, you know, a Kevin Bacon sort of situation where it's layers of connection, you know, but you start asking around. I started sending emails out just to people and say, I'm about to start the blurb process. I'm looking for blankety blank, or authors, or even anyone. I was trying to get like 90s icons, even just because of the book was set in the 90s. And
yeah.
And know that the amount of requests you make should be high, because you're going to get a 2 to 8% success, you know, maybe a 10% response rate, and then a percentage of that are actually going to finish the book and get the blurb done. So, but that process I would have started a lot earlier. I did not start that process early enough. Yeah.
Okay.
So what's the plan for this book then, in terms of, like, you talked about, like, you know, approaching it as a business and approaching people before the blurb and before it's out and stuff. Now that it is, are you going to follow the same sort of technique and, you know, maybe just mail it off to people and go, you know, I've written this, we'll see what you think and stuff like that? And is your plan partly to do that and then to keep writing? And have you got like another novel in the works, or have you got like more screenplays? Obviously you have, because you talked about the deadline today, but is that your plan moving forward then, to like nurture this book but also keep working on others and keep pushing them in the same sort of way?
Yeah, I mean, I think my film agents want me to just try to crack out a pilot based on the book or something like that they can start trying to sell. But I think the book needs to get a moderate amount of attention first. But yeah, I'm still sending it out. You know, when friends, I'm getting a lot of emails and texts from people I haven't spoken to in a long time who will be like, oh my God, I read the book, I loved it so much, you know, blah, blah, blah. And I'll say, like, you know, well, please spread the word. You know, publicity is difficult. Magazines don't exist anymore. You know, it's hard to try to get, some exposure. And invariably they say, oh yes, I've been lending it out to friends. I'm going to be like, well, first of all, make them buy it.
Yeah.
That's fine. But that's the process, right? It needs to get out there. It needs to kind of like, spider web out there, and then it'll randomly hit someone. I was tagged in a LinkedIn post of someone I do not know who has 50,000 followers, and he posted the book with like a 600 word, critique or love, how much he loved it, because he was in New York in the 90s and all this stuff. And I was like, I don't know how that happened, but it was one of those spider webs, probably one of those free, those lent out copies. But yeah, so I'm doing that, continuing with press, trying to get actors I've worked with to take pictures of themselves on the Euphoria set, reading it. I'm looking at you, James Landry-Hebert, and see what's what. But, it's just so, I've done writing so long in film and not really having this thing exist beyond like two-step or projects that haven't materialized yet. It is, I don't want to overstate how rewarding it is to have a book, but it's just been tremendous to just have it, and just to know it exists on paper, that will, not last 35 years probably, but still. But it's and it's such a personal book too. So that, I don't know. It's been a rewarding experience. I still obsess over sales, but I'm trying
with it, first of all, being a personal book, and the fact it related back to your youth in the location that you know so well, and having the process where your screenplays often went out to certain people and they kind of put it maybe on a shelf in a kind of way, and having this self-published book, when you released that, was there a big difference in kind of the feeling you had, or the nerves perhaps, releasing the book compared to screenplay, because you knew people were going to read it and give you feedback quite instantly compared to the screenplay sort of feedback?
Yeah. I think, with any writer, once you hit send, you're just filled with dread.
Yeah.
About even just about the grammar in the email. But yeah, it did. And when the blurbs would come in, I started to like pause my imposter syndrome for like 5 minutes, and then I would, and then I would have it again, and then another great blurb would come in. So I think, once it got out there, and everyone's been pretty positive about it, I'm not as nervous about it. If you don't like it, you don't like it. It's like I don't know what to do about that. But actually, the screenwriting stuff, people read it faster than they do the books. They at least when you're a professional, like when you're doing something for hire, or for, it's kind of terrifying. They'll send you a yes or a no pretty quickly.
Yeah.
But it's been positive. I think I skipped over another part of your question about business, just in terms of what I'm doing in terms of writing. Just to go back again, I forgot to say, I'm writing. I have another book. I have this character. I'd like to continue. Part of this is satisfying my urge to have my own detective character, which I think everybody wants to have their Columbo, so I do have a series of, the next book is pretty laid out. I haven't started writing it yet, but I have my spillage notes of what I want to do. So I'm gonna get started on that pretty soon. I need to get a sale with my day job. I need to make a little money for my agents and myself, and then I'll have the time to put back into the book. But yeah, I do want to continue with that.
Brilliant. Okay, so we've been chatting for a good 40 minutes about your journey so far, and we haven't heard about the book yet. So yeah. So could you tell us, or everybody, what the book is all about, and then we'll get some questions based on that.
So it start off in general terms, it's a take on first person noir, kind of that detective fiction, but it's also about being at that point in your life where, late 20s, where you kind of have to start making decisions and start being more active and less passive, and stop letting life happen to you, but you have to go out and engage with life. But so the protagonist is Nico Kelly, who is a private investigator, but he sort of doesn't see himself as that. He takes pictures for the city. Whenever a city employee has an insurance claim, he kind of just follows them for a little bit and takes some pictures in case they can prove that the insurance claim was false. And, he thinks he's kind of a snitch, and he doesn't really like his job, and he's kind of feeling a little lost. And he ends up following a police officer one day, and he is videotaping when two other undercover police officers show up at the police officer's house and kill him. And he can see, through a slit in the window, he can see just the muzzle flashes, but he doesn't see the definitive information. But he then takes it to his boss, who he thinks is going to help him out. But his boss ends up having other ideas of possibly blackmailing the cops to get some money out of them. And then everything just sort of starts unraveling and bodies start piling up. But in the interim, he's also 28 years old and hooking up and, going to pubs and playing pinball and judging those around him, which is the joy of first person. Yeah. But it's also an exploration in some ways of my own kind of genetic makeup. I'm half Ecuadorian and half Irish American, and in my writing, I've always kind of avoided that for some reason. I don't know. I felt like, you can't write about I can't just make somebody me. I don't know why I laid that on myself. Like, I thought it was but I didn't for years. And then I heard an interview with Gary Steingart where the interviewer was basically like, I can't help but notice your protagonist in your new book is a Russian writer who lives in New York. And he kind of pushed back really aggressively. And it was just like, why the hell can't I just it's my book, it's my life. That's what I want to write about. And, and as I get older and as parents and grandparents aren't around anymore to ask questions about who I am, I kind of feel like the book was an exploration of me asking those questions in some ways. So, yeah. So with a bit more murder. Yeah. You got to make it fun.
Yeah.
There's growing up, you're being Ecuadorian and being Irish American, you're generally too white for the Ecuadorian side and you're too brown for the Irish American side. But then nobody thinks you're Ecuadorian. So you also witness incredible racism, the things people have said to me, thinking I was, just a white kid. And I will say like, hey, I'm actually Latin American. I find that very offensive. And they're just like, well, you are, but you're not really, you don't look it and you don't act it. And so anyways, I kind of wanted to investigate that in some ways as well. And all set in 1998, Giuliani time, New York,
So was 1998 always the choice because it was something you could sort of, it was familiar in your mind, or was there other different sort of time scale you were tempted with?
It was, I wanted it to be Giuliani era, definitely. And I didn't want to get too close to 9/11. And it's right on the edge of what I can still remember, basically. Yeah. But it is like, for me, being at the time 27, 28, it is that, it is that moment in time I wanted the protagonist to be. So I just felt like, let's just set it then. And then I found, I have this little, an old book diary it wasn't a diary, but it was a date book, right? And because I used to do freelance film production, and I'd have to, if I was on hold, I'd have to put the dates down as pre, iCal, and BlackBerry and all that stuff. And so I found my book from 1998, and I still had it at the bottom of the box. And I pulled it out and flipped through and reading about, seeing like dates and movies and friends' names and bands' names and, and meet at this pub that doesn't exist anymore. And it just kind of all sent me back a little bit. And then just to help flesh it out, I got, I picked a date. I picked a literal week I wanted it to happen. And then I ordered The Village Voice from that week. And The Village Voice was the big independent weekly in New York City at the time. So it was where you'd have all the band listings and art listings and films and everything. And when you lived, that was like your Bible. You always had one on you because you always needed to know what was happening. And so I sort of flipped through those and just the ads, and it just kind of sent it all back in a clear way.
Amazing. You're going to jump
in, Alex? Yeah, I was just going to say, having like the desire to have a series of detective novels, have you got a time frame in mind for those as well? Is it going to be something that you're going to carry on for quite a few books? Like, obviously, we know a lot of people who've had quite a lot of success with that type of format, having a detective and following them for a period of history. Is that something that's crossed your mind and that you've thought about doing in the future?
Yeah, no, that's the plan. So the next novel will still be 20th century. That'll be 99. And then I don't want to deal with the immediate, I don't know. There's this fascinating period in New York. I was in New York for 9/11, and there was this really strange, the whole period was upsetting and strange, but there was a really weird period where when you started getting used to no planes flying over except jets, and military people with automatic weapons walking up and down the Brooklyn Bridge. And it was just like quiet. And it was a very strange time where the whole city seemed to be coming out of a coma, in some ways, and not sure what to do, or it was a very interesting time. So I don't want to deal with the immediate aftermath of 9/11, but that period there I find very fascinating. So that's where I would do the third one. Would be about 2000, mid 2001, probably, maybe a little after that, but yeah. And then after that, I'm not sure. Maybe the protagonist will just mirror my life and go down to Texas at some point. Who knows?
Yeah, why not? You have the setting. So Anya said that the book sounds really interesting. She's going to get it, and was in college in 1998 and remembers that era well. So I said, was that in New York? She said, no, Miami, but I lived in Connecticut until 97 and took the train to New York with friends in 95, 97.
Amazing.
So, yeah, so obviously that sort of local knowledge or history of being in that area, will people really resonate with the kind of detail of the city in your book? Because someone described it as very, as in New York being a character itself in your novel.
Yeah, I think it was important to get that, and that's probably why I couldn't go much beyond earlier than 98 because of my aging brain. But yeah, it's definitely I wanted you to feel it, and that's, without tooting my own horn, that's a lot of people have come up to me and just been like, how the hell did you remember that? But I think sometimes people do that when they're not writers, and they don't realize that, like, we're basically banking stuff for further use for our entire lives. We're in the moment, but we're also thinking how we can use this moment maybe later at home in front of our computer. So I've always, if things have stuck with me that there are certain images in the book I can remember when I thought, oh, I should use this. And I'm talking about things I remembered that I thought in 99. I was much better about notebooks back then. I used to walk with a notebook and I pretend that I'm doing it on my phone now, but it's not the same as when I used to walk around with a notebook and just scribble things down constantly.
Yeah.
What's the main difference then that you've noticed between script writing and writing a novel? What's the sort of day-to-day been like, comparing the two?
You know, I like to get my head in, whenever I'm approaching in a screenplay situation, I like to read everything. Even if I'm inching forward in a script, I like to start my day from page 1 reading and going into it, and then try to ride the momentum so I'm consistently in tone and going with the flow. But obviously with the book, I could not start the book from the beginning every day. It was, I was like, is that kind of like inching, going back a little bit. And then, so kind of figuring that rhythm out where I felt like I was in the voice of the character consistently, so I can move forward. But also, just like I've said it before, but it's when you're, writing scripts is a much faster process, and you really do get intimidated by that word count. It's just like, it's just, and then before you know, but then it's like, I would always set a goal for myself that was pretty low, just so I could reach it and just be like, okay, I did it. But I think part of my never having done it before, my big fear was not finishing it, not having the legs to finish it. And, maybe I'm going to go. I've never run a marathon, and I never will.
Yeah.
I had one of the production companies I used to produce at, there was just the accountant there, ran marathons, like 8 a year, like just traveled the country and ran marathon. And I asked her how she trains, and she was like, I don't need to train, she's like, I'll run like a couple of miles a day, but she's like, but I know the marathon now. Like, I know how to get through it. I know how I'm going to feel at this stage. I know if I push myself too hard here, I'm not going to make it to here. And I feel like writing the book is sort of like that. When I approach the next book, I'm not going to be as filled with terror at the word count. I kind of know, I know the feel, the muscle memory of it will help. I'm not saying it's going to be 1,000 times easier, but I think it's kind of like that. Like, you're kind of, now that I did it, I know I can do it, and I will do it again.
Absolutely. All right, Chris, we need to start on our staple questions, and then guys that are watching, if you've got questions for Alex, now is the time to pop them in the chat and we'll ask them. But first of all, Chris, do you want to start us off, and we'll get through it?
Yeah, so one of our staple questions that we have is, if you could take any character from fiction and make that character your own, which character you would choose and why?
Gosh, it might have to be Columbo, just because I love it so much. I mean, it's not really fiction. I know I've read novelizations. I'm that much of a Columbo addict. But
yeah, great.
I'll stick to fiction. I love Elmer Leonard, and I feel like Gold Coast has had such an influence on all my work. I mean, you could argue that a good chunk of Elmer Leonard's is sort of in the same vibe as Gold Coast, but I forget the protagonist's name in that. But it just has ripple effects in everything. I mean, the thing I wrote today, definitely the thing I'm working on right now, that involves the Dixie Mafia, and it feels Elmer Leonard influence throughout it. That would probably be that.
Nice. With Elmer Leonard, a lot of people talk about him as being such an inspirational figure in both screenwriting and novels. So, like, why do you think that is, from your professional viewpoint now, having been through that process? What makes Elmer Leonard so special in that regard?
I'll again, like, something that my agents will say about any agent will say about their client is they'll talk about a script having a real Alex R. Johnson vibes, you know, and I think it's a stretch for me. But when you pick up an Elmore Leonard book and you read the first page and you hold it in your hands, you're in his world. And, you know, you talk about a Marvel like multiverse, like you just believe that this world exists of all his characters, you know, through time. It's just such a clear voice. It's so clean. And I mean that in terms of like, he doesn't try to be fancy, but at the same time, there'll be a line of description that will just drop you, you know? I feel the same way about Richard Price. You know, Richard Price is, his description will be limited. He won't be heavily descriptive all the time, but then he'll just, you know, he'll say something and you just put the book down and you're just like, wow, you know, that just blows you away. So, yeah.
Yeah, nice. Okay. If you could take the ending of anything, whether that be a TV show, a novel, or a film, and change the ending to something, what ending would you change and why?
Oh boy. Maybe the ending of St. Elsewhere. I don't know if you're too young for that. The TV show about the hospital, you know, I think that they ended by a little boy staring into a globe and the hospital was inside the globe, and they were alluding to the fact that the entire show is the entire like eight seasons of the show were inside the globe and the boy's imagination. And I found it, I think most people found it a little insulting.
Yeah, I bet. Oh, that sounds terrible. Brilliant.
Yeah. The next question that you have is it's a bit of a morbid one, but you're on your deathbed, you're looking back at your writing career. What would you be happy with? What is success to you?
You know, I'd have to say at this point, the book, you know, I mean, the book is, the book's about, there's a dead father in the book that's very present, not as a ghost or anything, but it's very present. And so it's a father and son thing. I have a son. I obviously have a father. I feel like, you know, when my son reads the book, I mean, he's old enough to read it, but he has not read it. When he reads the book, he'll know me in ways that he'll never, that you know, he would never get just talking to me. Even though it's not my life, but it's there, but I'm in it, you know, I mean, my spirit, I think. And yeah, I think that's why.
Nice. Yeah, nice answer. Okay, I've got a question that's not a staple question, but it's one I want to ask. You mentioned screenplays earlier, Alien and Aliens, two of my favorite films in the past or currently still. There's a new series coming out, Alien Earth.
Yeah.
I'm very skeptical of this. It looks great, the trailer so far. However, there's so much they could do with Aliens and Earth. What they've shown so far is very sort of classically Alien style. Mm-hmm. What are your hopes as someone who's in the screenwriting world for something such a big scale to come out so far away from the original?
You know, I can only trust in Noah Hawley, who created that show and who did the Fargo adaptation, and gosh, what else has he done? I forget. But he's so good, and he's such a great writer. He's one of the screenwriters I recommend people read. One of the TV screenwriters, because I think he's so talented. So I'm just gonna trust in Noah Hawley. I mean, it's any of these things, you know, you're always supposed to. It's funny because when you're adapting things, or when you're presented with something that existed in another environment or medium, Hollywood claims to really want you to put your take on it. They're like, we want the Noah Hawley vibe, we want the Alex R. Johnson, whatever, you know. But that might not be what the audience wants. But so we'll see. But he's so talented. I think I'm hoping it'll be good.
Yeah. Well, I saw a very, very small trailer today, and it looks so far on the money. So let's have our fingers crossed, eh? Yeah. Question from Anya. Thank you very much. If you can go on an all-expensive paid writer's retreat for your next creative work, where would it be? In other words, what place could inspire you like no other?
When I was in Texas, about a few years in, I was ready to leave. And I have wonderful friends. I love Texas. I love Austin, but I'm a New Yorker, and I just never quite vibed with it. About the third year, we went to Marfa, which is West Texas, which basically imagine No Country for Old Men. It's all shot there in that area. It's a type of place, you could walk out with a bottle of wine, lay down in the middle of the road in the middle of the night, and just lay on your back and look at stars. And, no one's going to come by except maybe a wild hog or two. And it's just, it's the kind of place where you start using words like magical unironically. You drop all cynicism about what an environment can do to you. And I think that it's that kind of, it's like a blank slate without being entirely blank. So you're able to focus, but you're still able to feel like you're part of the world, but a small part. I like places that make me feel a little small, that just make me kind of be in awe at the size and scope of our existence. So there's a lovely place there that I couldn't afford to stay at long enough to write a book, but I'd love to.
Yeah. Sounds good.
Yeah.
Brilliant. Okay, so we have gone over our hour, and I'm very, very conscious that you've got a deadline very much looming over your head right now. So before we wrap this up, where can people find out more information about yourself? Where can they go and buy Brooklyn Motto and stalk you on social media?
Sure. So if you're in the States, we have I would recommend going to bookshop.org. That's the online marketplace where you can actually still support your local bookstore, where they get a cut of the sale. You just list them and they get it. So, or just go to your bookstore and order it if you don't have it. If you need to order it from Amazon, you may say no, but it does serve a purpose in the world. So it's out there. It's pretty much worldwide, I believe. And on socials, I'm Hacienda Films. So at Hacienda Films on Instagram, and I'm on Blue Sky now. I got off the Twitter as my country dives into a flaming tar pit. I figured that was the least thing I could do, so I got off Twitter. And the film Two Step, if you're curious about it, is available for rent on iTunes and Amazon and Amazon. It's on Amazon Prime, so you can just watch it for free if you have that, and Google Play. So it's out there. Yeah.
Amazing. So with that in mind, everybody, please go ahead and follow him wherever you may. Pick up the book. We'll leave a link in the description. Link in the description for that. And have a great weekend, everybody, and look after yourselves, and we'll see you all very soon. So from us, thank you very much, Alex, for coming on the show. You've been a great guest with a brilliant story. A first-class professional who's got a lot more coming, I believe, and including who is going to make and achieve his deadline very, very shortly. Yeah, thank you from me.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Thanks for having me.
You're very welcome. Anything for you, Chris?
No, just again, please, obviously people have already said in the chat about picking up Alex's book. So yeah, go and support the authors that support the show and come on and give us great advice like Alex has done tonight. And yeah, maybe enjoy a movie night. It's Friday and go over to Amazon and watch Two Step, or go and order it and get some popcorn out and enjoy it.
Sounds good to me. Thank you, everybody. See you soon. Bye.
Thank you.